The Grand Traverse was the ultimate test of sentient potential in the known galaxy. Established millennia ago by a long-vanished precursor race, it was not a competition in the traditional sense, but a brutal, planet-spanning series of trials, designed to push the limits of biology, technology, and will. The Traverse was a rite of passage, a way for species to prove their mettle and earn a place of honor among the elder races. The prize was not mere glory, but access to a vast, unparalleled precursor data archive, a treasure trove of knowledge that could elevate a civilization by eons. For 10,000 years, countless species had attempted the Traverse, and for 10,000 years, they had all failed. The trials were held on a single, massive planet named Xylos, a world artificially constructed by the precursors to be a living crucible. It was a planet of a dozen distinct, impossibly hostile biomes, each designed to test a specific aspect of a species' capabilities. The Cathar, a species of six-limbed, lightning-fast insectoids, would blaze through the speed trials of the glass plains, only to have their fragile exoskeletons shatter under the crushing pressure of the gravity pits. The Grolthak, massive, rock-skinned behemoths, would contemptuously shrug off the gravity pits, only to have their slow metabolisms fail in the scorching heat of the sun-scorched wastes, a desert where temperatures reached levels that could melt lead. The Sylvani, sentient plant beings with unparalleled bioadaptation, could survive the toxic jungles and acidic swamps, but their slow, deliberate movements meant they could never complete the Traverse within the allotted time. Every species was a specialist, a master of their own evolutionary niche, but the Grand Traverse was a test for generalists. It didn't reward the fastest, or the strongest, or the most resilient. It rewarded the species that was all of these things at once, even if only to a mediocre degree. It rewarded endurance. When humanity, a chaotic bipedal species from a backwater star system, announced their intention to attempt the Traverse, the galactic community reacted with a mixture of pity and derision. Humans were average. We were not exceptionally strong, nor fast, nor resilient to extreme environments. Our technology was practical but uninspired. We were, by all galactic metrics, the unremarkable middle of the pack. High Lord Vinar of the Cathar, a being whose every movement was a blur of speed, addressed the human envoy with unconcealed condescension. Human, your species bipedal. Locomotion is inefficient. Your metabolic rate is average. Your pain tolerance is adequate. How do you possibly expect to survive the first trial, let alone complete the Traverse? The human envoy, a quiet, unassuming woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, a specialist in human evolutionary biology and endurance physiology, simply smiled. Lord Vinar, you mistake our averages for mediocrity. Our greatest strength isn't in any single peak of performance. It's in our ability to simply keep going. The human team was not composed of super soldiers or genetically engineered athletes. It was a small, diverse group of individuals who represented the pinnacle of a very specific, very human trait: endurance. There was a former ultra-marathoner, a woman who had run for days through deserts and mountains. There was a deep-sea saturation diver, a man whose body was accustomed to crushing pressures and extreme isolation. There was a high-altitude mountaineer, a woman whose lungs and muscles were optimized for thin, oxygen-deprived air. They were not the strongest or the fastest. They were the marathoners. And they were about to show the galaxy the true, terrifying power of the human capacity to suffer and to endure. The Grand Traverse began, as it always did, with the sprint of the glass plains. This was a vast, flat expanse of obsidian-like crystal designed to test raw speed. The Cathar had always excelled here, their six-limbed gait a blur of motion. The human team, led by the ultra-marathoner, a woman named Lena, started at a steady, almost plodding pace. The galactic observers, watching through a network of precursor drones, were unimpressed. They are jogging, commented the Cathar observer, a note of disbelief in his clicking mandibles. This is a sprint, not a leisurely stroll. But as the hours turned into a full cycle, a strange thing began to happen. The Cathar champions, after their initial explosive burst of speed, began to falter. Their fast-twitch muscles, not designed for prolonged exertion, began to fatigue. The human team, however, simply continued their steady, relentless jog. They were not the first to cross the finish line. The Cathar were. But the humans were the least fatigued. While the Cathar champion collapsed, its exoskeleton heaving, the human team simply took a short break, rehydrated, and prepared for the next trial. The next trial was the gravity pits, a series of deep, artificial chasms where the gravitational force was 10 times that of a standard Terran G. This was the domain of the Gauntlet, their dense bodies shrugging off the immense pressure. The human team, led by the deep-sea diver, a man named Jax, entered the pits. The crushing gravity was immense, a physical weight that would have shattered the bones of most species. The humans groaned, their muscles straining, their bodies screaming in protest, but they did not break. It's like being 100 meters down, without the water. Jax grunted over their comms, his voice strained. Slow, steady movements. Control your breathing. Don't fight it. Just endure it. Their bodies, adapted to the constant, unforgiving pull of a high-gravity world, were surprisingly resilient. Their bones were denser, their muscles more robust than those of the lighter gravity species. They moved with an agonizing slowness, but they moved. They descended into the pits, retrieved the required precursor artifact, and then began the grueling, inch-by-inch climb back out. The Gauntlet champion, though unaffected by the gravity, was slow and cumbersome. The human team, though in immense pain, moved with a surprising efficiency, their smaller, more agile bodies allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain with a speed that belied their suffering. They emerged from the gravity pits bruised, battered, and on the verge of collapse. But they had done it, and they had done it faster than the Gauntlet. The galactic observers were stunned. The humans were not excelling at any single trial, but they were performing adequately at all of them. The third trial was the sun-scorched wastes, a brutal desert where the surface temperature could boil water. This was a test of thermal regulation and metabolic efficiency. The human team, led by the high-altitude mountaineer, a woman named Anya, entered the wastes. The heat was a physical blow, a searing wave that threatened to overwhelm their senses, but humanity possessed a unique and, in this case, life-saving biological advantage: sweating. While other species relied on external cooling, systems or inefficient internal heat sinks, humans could actively cool their bodies through the evaporation of sweat. It was a messy, inefficient process that required a constant intake of water, but it was incredibly effective. As the other species' champions began to suffer from heat stroke, their bodies unable to shed the immense thermal load, the human team, clad in specialized moisture-wicking gear, simply kept walking. They sweated profusely, their bodies glistening in the harsh sun, but they maintained a stable core temperature. "Stay hydrated," Anya reminded her team, her voice raspy. "Small sips. Conserve your energy. This isn't a race, it's a marathon." They crossed the sun-scorched wastes, not with speed, but with a relentless, plodding endurance. They were not the fastest, but they were the only ones who crossed it without suffering from severe heat-related trauma. The galactic observers were now in a state of bewildered fascination. The humans, with their average physiology, were proving to be surprisingly resilient. Their ability to sweat, once considered a primitive and slightly unhygienic biological quirk, was now seen as a remarkable feat of evolutionary engineering. The traverse continued. The human team faced a dozen more trials, each designed to test a different aspect of their capabilities. They navigated the toxic jungles of xylos, their adaptable immune systems, honed by millennia of fighting Earth-based pathogens, proving surprisingly effective against alien microbes. They climbed the razor-sharp peaks of the crystal spires, their mountaineering skills and sheer human stubbornness allowing them to find paths where others saw only impassable cliffs. They were not winning in a conventional sense. They were not breaking records. They were simply enduring. They were pushing their bodies to the absolute limit, surviving on a cocktail of advanced nutrition, recycled water, and sheer, unadulterated grit. The psychological toll was immense. They faced isolation, fear, and excruciating pain. But humanity had another, even more potent, secret weapon: camaraderie and dark humor. In the depths of the echoing caverns, a trial designed to induce sensory deprivation and psychological distress, the human team kept their sanity by telling each other terrible jokes. In the midst of the acidic swamps, while waist-deep in corrosive sludge, they sang ancient off-key sea shanties. They complained, they swore, they mocked their own suffering, and in doing so they found the strength to continue. "What do you call a Gauntlet with 3 eyes?" Jax grunted as he helped Lena over a particularly treacherous rock formation. "I don't know, Jax." "What?" Lena gasped, her muscles screaming. "More to get poked in the eye with." A round of exhausted, pained laughter echoed through the cavern. It was a uniquely human sound, the sound of a species that had learned to find humor in the darkest of places. The other species, observing from their pristine logical command centers, could not comprehend this. They saw only suffering. They did not understand that for humans, shared suffering was often the forge of the strongest bonds. After months of grueling, relentless effort, the human team reached the final trial, the pinnacle of despair. It was not a physical challenge, but a psychological one. The pinnacle was a towering spire that projected a powerful psionic field, forcing any who approached to confront their deepest fears, their most profound regrets, their ultimate sense of hopelessness. The Cathar, with their rigid, honor-bound society, were often broken by visions of personal failure. The Gauntlet, with their simple, pragmatic minds, were overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of existential dread. No species had ever reached the summit. The human team, battered, bruised, and on the verge of physical and mental collapse, began their ascent. The psionic field washed over them, a wave of pure, concentrated despair. Lena, the ultra-marathoner, was confronted by a vision of a race she had lost, of the moment she had realized her body had failed her. But she pushed through it. She had lost races before. She had known failure, and she had always gotten up and run again. Jax, the deep-sea diver, was shown a vision of being trapped in the crushing, abyssal darkness of the deep ocean, his air running out. But he pushed through it. He had faced that fear 100 times in his career. He knew how to control his breathing, how to calm his mind, how to survive in the crushing dark. Anya, the mountaineer, saw a vision of a climbing partner. She had lost in a storm, a moment of profound guilt and sorrow, but she pushed through it. She had lived with that grief, that scar, for years. It was a part of her. It was a part of what made her strong. The human mind, so often seen as fragile and emotional, proved to be their greatest asset. They had all known failure. They had all known despair. They had all lived lives filled with the messy, painful, and ultimately strengthening imperfections of the human experience. The Pinnacle's psionic assault was not showing them anything new. It was simply showing them the scars they already carried. They reached the summit of the pinnacle of despair, not as triumphant heroes, but as weary, scarred survivors. They were the first and only species to ever complete the grand traverse. The galaxy was stunned. The humans, the unremarkable generalists, the species of adequate capabilities, had succeeded where the strongest, the fastest, and the most resilient had failed. High Lord Vinar of the Cathar, his mandibles clicking in disbelief, rewatched the recordings of the human team's journey. He saw their slow, steady pace on the glass plains, their agonizing but relentless climb from the gravity pits, their sweaty, determined march across the sun-scorched wastes. And he finally understood. They are not sprinters, Vinar projected. To the galactic community, his voice filled with a new, profound respect. They are marathoners. Their strength is not in the single explosive act, but in the sustained, unending effort. They do not win by being the best. They win by simply not stopping. The precursor data archive was unlocked. Humanity, in its humble, unassuming way, was given the honor of sharing its vast knowledge with the rest of the galaxy. But the true prize was not the data. It was the lesson humanity had taught the universe. The other species began to reevaluate their own evolutionary paths. The Cathar began to incorporate endurance training into their warrior regimens. The Grolthak started to develop more agile, adaptable technologies. The Silvani, inspired by humanity's resilience, began to explore the concept of individual will and the strength found in struggle. Humanity, once the galactic underdog, became the unlikely tutors of a new philosophy, the philosophy of endurance. We were not the masters of any single discipline, but we were the masters of suffering, of persistence, of the simple, brutal, and beautiful art of putting one foot in front of the other again and again until the race was won. Years passed. The galaxy, armed with the precursor's knowledge and humanity's newfound wisdom, entered a new era of exploration and cooperation. The Grand Traverse its purpose served was decommissioned, its secrets now part of the shared galactic heritage. Lena, Jax, and Anya, the first marathoners, returned to Earth as heroes, but they did not seek fame or glory. They returned to their quiet, unassuming lives, forever changed by their experience, but still profoundly human. Lena continued to run, not for records, but for the quiet, meditative joy of the long-distance journey. Jax returned to the sea, finding solace in the familiar crushing embrace of the deep. Anya continued to climb, seeking the quiet, wind-swept solitude of the world's highest peaks. The ultimate lesson of their journey was not about winning a race, but about the very nature of the human spirit. We are a species born of endurance, forged in the crucible of a harsh and unforgiving world. Our strength is not in our perfection, but in our imperfections. Our glory is not in our triumphs, but in our ability to endure our failures and to keep moving forward. The galaxy had learned that true power was not always about speed or strength or a perfectly optimized system. Sometimes it was about the simple, stubborn, and utterly indomitable will to just keep going. Humanity, the marathoners of the cosmos, had shown the universe that the race did not always go to the swift, but to the one who was willing to endure the long, painful, and ultimately glorious marathon of existence. And in that, we were and would always be the undisputed champions.